My name is Jim Smither. I'm an assistant professor in the Urban and Regional Studies and Planning program here at the university in the Wilder School. We're going to have a wonderful lecture with Professor Howard over here in a few minutes. After the lecture, we're going to have a question and answer period. About midway through the lecture, some of our staff are going to come through with index cards and pens for you to write down questions that we'll be collecting at the end of the lecture for our speaker to answer at that time. I'd like to introduce the chair of our program, Dr. Jimmy Chin. Could you please welcome me? Could you please help me welcome Dr. Chin?
Thank you so much, Jin. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Dr. Jimmy Chen, current program chair of Urban Regional and Study Planning programs. And on behalf of our programs, I want to warmly welcome all of you to attend tonight's events. And on these important occasions, I would like to acknowledge the event sponsorship of Virginia Housings and also thank the Gulak family, including the late Paul Gulak, Lauren Gulak, Michelle Wolf, and other family members. And also I would like to, thank the family support so much. I also would like to thank the Dean's Office for your strong leadership and our communication events development teams for their phenomenal works. And also I'm indebted to my colleagues, faculty colleagues. Especially, I'm very thankful for Jim Smither. He put a lot of efforts in organizing this signature event. Thank you, Jim, and thank you for faculty members so much. And next, I want to briefly introduce the background of Gulak Lecture and also provide an overview of the urban planning program very briefly. As you know, the wider school brings the leading experts in urban planning, design architecture experts for the past almost 10 years to the VCU campus to give the Morton B. Gulak Lecture, Urban Regional Planning. And this signature event started in 2013. And the lecture series honors the memory of Professor Morton Gulak, who helped fund the Urban Regional Planning programs almost 50 years ago, and who passed away, unfortunately, in 2012. And Professor Gulak taught at the VCU for 38 years, and he has educated thousands of students in urban planning, urban designs, urban revitalization, etc., and made outstanding contributions to our programs. So we sorely miss the Professor Gulak. We miss him a lot, our colleagues. And in terms of urban planning programs, urban planning program is a flagship program of the wider schools. And this program was founded in 1973, almost 50 years ago. And the program recognized by American Planning Association in 1977. And ever since 1982, our program has been accredited by the planning accreditation boards. And most recently, we also won the second consecutive 7-year accreditations. And our next accreditation will occur in 2028, okay? And our program, we have 12 dynamic faculty members, and our MERPA students, roughly about 50 MERPA students. And we are very strong in our research in a couple of areas, for example, like in sustainability analysis, environmental energy research, geospatial analysis, and housing, etc. And all of these research areas are aligned with the VCU research strategic priority plans. Our program is in great shape, and all of these achievements wouldn't have been possible without the collective efforts made by all of our faculty colleagues, as well as the leadership of all the past program chairs. And I want to recognize all my faculty colleagues and the former program chairs, and I'm going to show their pictures. And these are the current 12 full-time faculty members in our programs. And we also have 20 adjunct faculty colleagues as well. Okay, these are full-time faculty members. And during the past 2 decades, our program has been led by the couple of program chairs. And the first was Professor John Codino. Thank you so much, Professor John Codino. Thank you so much. Yeah. And after Professor Acodino, Dr. Ivan Swan also lead our programs for 6 years. Thank you, Professor Swan. And after Professor Sun, Professor Megan Goff also led us for a couple of years. Immediately before me, Dr. Damien Pitt also led the programs. He also led our second PIB accreditation programs, and I'm very thankful for their past leadership for our programs. And also, most of you already knows, but I want to just share one set of stories. One of our founding father of our programs, Professor John Mises, unfortunately, he recently also passed away. And Professor John Mises had been a tireless advocate for more just societies over the course of 35 years at VCUs. And he taught at VCU from 1971 through 2005 and retired. Then later on, he taught at the University of Richmond. And he had been faculty at the VCU for 35 years. And he also authored several books on race and politics and the relationship between cities and the suburbs. He is a strong advocate for just societies. And so I'm very thankful, and we all remember the outstanding contribution of Professor John Mises. Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much. With this brief overview, now it's my great honors and a privilege to introduce the Dean of our wider school, Professor Susan Golden. Welcome, Professor Golden. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Chen, and good evening, everyone. I am delighted to appear before you this evening and to welcome you to the Gulak Lecture. You know, this is a wonderful event, and I'm so excited that we're back in person for the Gulak Lecture. We were on a hiatus for 2 years because of the pandemic, but the generosity of the Gulak family continued as they supported students throughout that period, and we're just excited to be back in person. I'm especially pleased, even though I've only been dean for a relatively short time, since 2018 in this role, I had the pleasure of working closely with Morton Gulak when I first came to VCU. As a matter of fact, our offices were on the same floor, on the 5th floor together. And, you know, so to see this has come full circle, and the way that the family has just been so committed to continuing his values, his principles, I think is really admirable. I know we also mourn the loss of Mrs. Gulak, Paula Gulak. I had many times to interact with her as well. And so it's a bit bittersweet that we are joined back again after the pandemic, but that now Mrs. Gulak is no longer with us as well. But we are delighted that the Gulak family continues to provide their support. I especially want to recognize their son, Lauren, who is here with us this evening. Really appreciate all the support of the Gulak family. What I will say, I want to echo Professor Chen's comments relative to the Urban and Regional Planning Program and the excellence of the program. Many years ago, I served as Director of Graduate Studies in the Wilder School, and I was always impressed that, as you can evidence today, that the support from the students and the alumni is just unparalleled. And I think that's a real feather in the cap of MERP in terms of being able to provide internship opportunities for our students, mentorship opportunities. And so I want to thank you for the support that you continue to provide to urban and regional planning, as well as to the Wilder School, and especially to our students. We are proud that we are ranked, the Wilder School, within the top 15% of all programs nationwide. And we are tied for #1 in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And that's because of the excellence of the faculty that you see demonstrated here this evening, as well as to the wonderful work of our students and our alum. I just want to echo what has been said relative to the Urban and Regional Planning Program, and to give a special thanks to Jim Smither, to Jimmy Chin, to Stephen Dozier, our Director of Development, as well as our Communications Director, David Slifer, for making this event possible, and for their teams. So please join me in giving them a round of applause. I'm honored to introduce tonight's keynote speaker, Christopher J. Howard. C.J. Howard is a practitioner and full-time professor contributing to the advancement of the school's classical traditional pedagogy. Some of his research includes the documentation of classical and traditional heritage architecture with a particular focus in the Washington, D.C. area, where he serves at Catholic University. In 2019, Mr. Howard won the Leicester B. Holland Prize competition for the complete documentation of the Lyceum building in Old Town, Alexandria. Mr. Howard has also been active on the subject of monuments and memorials by entering competitions and offering commentary and design proposals. Howard received recognition as the winning entry of a Contrabands and Freedmen's Cemetery Memorial in Alexandria, Virginia. His winning design, chosen from among several hundred entries submitted from 20 countries, wow, that's very impressive, was used as the design framework for the memorial that was completed and dedicated in 2014. As a professional architect, he has spent more than 2 decades practicing in the Washington, D.C. region, where he has had extensive experience working for firms nationally known for their commitment to classical and traditional design. Mr. Howard served as lead project architect, leading the design and construction of major ecclesiastical projects. In addition to this portfolio, Mr. Howard has experience in residential, civic, and urban design. Some urban design projects include collaboration with the District Department of Transportation to propose new visionary projects for our nation's capital. Today, Mr. Howard is building on past experiences and cultivating his own firm, working on projects that include renovation designs for historical houses and renovations. Mr. Howard received both his Bachelor of Architecture and Master of Architectural Design and Urbanism degrees from the University of Notre Dame. Please join me in welcoming Professor Howard.
Thank you so much. Good evening, everybody. It's great to see you. Get the lights blaring in my eyes a little bit. But yeah, great to be here. Thank you very much, Dean, for that introduction. I also want to say thank you to Jim for his invitation on behalf of the school. The significance of this lecture series isn't lost on me, especially having been here all today. I got a really great tour. I got to meet with several people that were able to tell me a little bit more about the school and about the city. So I'm grateful, I'm humbled, I'm honored, and I will share that I've always admired Richmond from afar, not very far, just up 95 in DC and Alexandria. But it's been a city that's always kind of on my mind in interesting ways. So it's just a great pleasure to be back. It's always a fruitful experience when I come, and today has been no different, where I've been able to learn more about the city. So what I want to say is that I hope to continue that fruitful experience in what I'm about to present. The subject matter is very important. It's important to me, both academically and personally, and I know very much it's important for the city of Richmond. So it's with that in mind that I would like to impart something, some sort of intellectual value that hopefully helps the city of Richmond in particular with respect to monuments move forward in positive ways. So with that, I will get started. Just test things here. Little technical assistance here, it's not advancing. Sorry about that. Good. Okay, perfect. Thank you. So I would like to begin by sharing you some of my background that I believe has been formative in the trajectory of my thoughts on the subject of civic art and monuments. I'm a military brat. My father was in the Army, and on one of his tours of duty, he had us move to Germany when I was in grade school. While there, it was a pretty regular occurrence that we take family and school field trips to notable cities to experience the culture and its significant architecture and urban spaces. What left a particularly lasting and profound impression on me was visiting the prominent cathedrals of those cities. I remember very vividly a school field trip to Cologne, Germany. We arrived at the Cathedral Plaza, where I was first struck by the sheer verticality of the facade and unapologetic spires. All of a sudden, I felt very small, but not insignificant. As we approached the main entry, I was struck again, this time by the abundance of detail and unavoidable presence of human beings, cast in stone on and within the architecture. These figures clearly were not there as simple ornament, given their provocative countenance of profound piousness, sobriety, and conviction. It was as if they all knew something and were confident that the curiosity of anyone who entered would be rewarded. At the time, they were simply curious and eerie, but definitely spoke to me on a deeper level. In looking back and answering the unasked question at the time of what exactly is going on here, I am able to now understand that the figures are following a scriptural interpretation of the faithful, being figuratively and literally part of a church as a mystical body of Christ, from foundation stones to keystones to pillars. The most prominent and visible architectural locations would be reserved for the exceptional figures known to have achieved great virtue and devotion. This is a notable part of rich tradition in human representation in our built environment, to arrest our attention through beauty and empathy. Even within the context of religious buildings, these figures have been controversial. Byzantine iconoclasm, for example, was a response to concern about idolizing human beings. Monuments, as we all know today, are similarly just as provocative and controversial. They are the things in our built environment that give us pause, arrest our attention, and offer an agenda of declared transcendent value worth remembering beyond being pleased. When discussing civic art and monuments in particular, I found myself in somewhat of an unenviable position of feeling the need to be an apologist, explaining and then defending their value. They can be like good friends that constantly get into trouble. Today, the sight of an elegant Roman classical pedestal bearing a heroic figure on horseback or a triumphal arch in full regalia provokes in some a sense of suspicion rather than one of awe and admiration. Monuments have suddenly and increasingly found themselves as foreigners in their homeland. This suggests a changing landscape for the civic art and monuments and the notion of commemorate. Very directly and prolifically contributing to this skepticism are the high-profile collection of Confederate monuments we find in our built environment today. As we all know, in the past couple of years, the United States has experienced a crescendo of discourse and action related to past monuments and social justice, with Richmond being at the epicenter. So, given what potential tensions these works of civic art engender, is it fair to ask the question, what exactly is the value of these participants in our civic life? What, if anything, should be done with them? What should we have them at all? To begin to answer this question, I would like to take us up to a 10,000-foot view, bear with me, to address a more universal question with respect to our professions as designers, planners, and makers. What is the primary responsibility of architects and urban designers? What ultimately is our top priority and calling? How best do we achieve that calling? To answer in short, very short, I give you 3 letters, HSW. I think most professionals in the room would recognize that, and perhaps there are continuing education credits available here. HSW standing for Health, Safety, and Welfare. These principles are defined by AIA today as the following. Health, those aspects of professional practice that improve the physical, emotional, and social well-being of occupants, users, and any other affected by buildings and sites. Safety, those aspects of professional practice that protect occupants, users, and others affected by buildings or sites from harm. And then finally, welfare, those aspects of professional practice that enable equitable access, elevate the human experience, encourage social interaction, and benefit the environment. In summary, we have a fiduciary responsibility to individuals and to the public to make buildings and cities safe, healthy, and good. Sorry for the AIA lesson. Health and safety are very pragmatic and understandable contractual obligations. But what exactly is welfare getting at? I might suggest, for the purposes of this talk, that we consider this through a lens of what architects and designers can offer beyond contractors, developers, and politicians, namely art. Historically speaking, architects and designers carry this particular mantle of providing for the intangible needs of the soul of society through the tangible production of aesthetic meaning. We bring art into the fold of our built environment. And perhaps in an even more expansive understanding of welfare, we should also include the idea of human flourishing and community, being that we are naturally social and relational creatures. To ignore this is to deny any essential aspect of our well-being, and essential aspect of our well-being. Welfare, broadly speaking, suggests an ethical dimension. Here in the United States, we combined that ethical dimension to our founding principles and thus be guided by them and our national prerogative. As we see in the preamble of the Constitution, there's a clear reference to welfare. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. Further, I believe this ethical dimension should also necessarily acknowledge and embrace our Judeo-Christian biblical culture, history, and essence. Both of these sources speak to the idea of general welfare being directly tied to the idea of togetherness, and that each one of us is part of a greater whole. As in the Constitution, we were separate states being brought together to be greater than the sum of parts. This can be understood as a guiding principle for society in general, that we think of ourselves first as part of a larger whole, but in concert with the idea of individual freedom. Right alongside this notion of union or unity is justice and liberty. As Americans, we hold the virtue of justice and the blessing of liberty in the highest regard. I offer these interpretive definitions to hopefully better guide discussion about the value of civic art and monuments. First, justice, the moral quality or habit which perfects the will and inclines it to render to each and all what belongs to them. And then freedom and liberty, the cultivated ability to act with virtue and maturity in choosing what is good for yourself and ultimately others. This comes from the traditional and Christian notions of being freed from our enslavement to our passions and appetites, where we are better able to achieve our true potential in the context of others. So, our mission, should we choose to accept it, is to achieve welfare through the promotion and encouragement of unity, liberty, and justice in our built environment, from the city to the family to the individual. For the purposes of this talk, we will use these ideas as a touch point for monuments and begin by asking, how can architects contribute to the welfare of society through unity, justice, and liberty in our built environment? In particular, for historically underrepresented groups such as women and minorities. Here are some ideas. By promoting and supporting equitable opportunities for people of all backgrounds within the profession, by promoting and supporting real estate and development policies that are just for people of all socioeconomic backgrounds, by bringing just awareness to significant female and minority architects and planners and their achievements through history, by promoting and committing to excellent architecture and urban design available to everyone that encourages living together in harmony within a good and just society. And finally, by promoting equitable representation in the civic realm with civic art to include monuments and memorials that help form identity and inspire goodness. This last point arguably holds the most potential with respect to the visual impact that art can have on our welfare. So it is here that we begin to dive into this idea of civic art and architecture as an apparatus for contributing to social justice. So, what exactly is civic? What exactly does civic mean? It's a term that gets floated out there, but I don't think is often understood in literal terms. Civic means relating to duties or activities of people in relation to their town or city or local area. Civic also historically refers to the chibicas, which is seen here on the slide, the crown of laurels that was given out in ancient Rome to somebody who had saved another Roman citizen's life. Ancient cultures professed an allegiance to their cities as a virtuous act. And you can see the quote here coming from ancient Athens. We will ever strive for the ideals of sacred things of the city, both alone and with many. We will increasingly seek to quicken the sense of public duty. We will revere and obey the city's laws. We will transmit the city not less, but greater, better, and more beautiful than it was transmitted to us. And so I invite you to imagine if that was something that we did today. If, say, at the age of 18, you had to go to the courthouse and say that same quote at different times. Pretty heavy stuff, but interesting to think about what people used to think of their cities. So then, what is civic art? Taking that idea of civic art, that definition that I'm offering, adding to it this idea of what art is, and art can be sort of a floating definition as well. I like to think of it as transcendent aesthetic value. Another term I use is truth liberated from experience. Perhaps not as easily understood as the aesthetic value aspect. But if you put those two things together, civic art is a way to dutifully enhance and strengthen neighborhoods, towns, or cities by providing color, character, and meaning to public spaces through transcendent aesthetics. It also helps promote a spirit of civility and unity. So here are a couple of examples, just to put picture to words, of what civic art is, and I think most of us know, basically, but just it's nice to see this up front. This might be the most prominent versions of civic art in our country, in the Washington Monument. And then we have figures of very significant historical people in our country's history, into more object-like monuments, for example, that may include human figures as well, but that occupy civic space with some sort of structure. And it can be even more recreational. We see fountains all over in civic spaces as one of the main objects that could be used to enliven a space. Included in that would be relief, something of a narrative as opposed to like a singular statue of a monument, that you would have a series of people creating some more dynamic narrative within the civic realm, and down to two-dimensional versions of murals or even graffiti, that it would be seen as not just three-dimensional, but two-dimensional. And here is actually an image of original graffiti in Italy. This is where it came from. It's called sgraffito. And you can see on these building facades, it's very much an applied art of civic meaning. There's a story to it. It enriches the building, but more importantly, it enriches the civic realm. So those are some examples of civic art, just to have that in our minds. Monuments are a type of civic art, and you can think of it as the exemplary civic art, just given how charged it can be, and how it can inspire, and ultimately how it could increase our welfare together. So what are they? What are monuments? Let's address that directly. In order to understand what a monument is, it's important to understand the idea of commemorating, and you hear that term used pretty commonly. But that term directly lies with monumentality and monuments. Commemorating, as a definition, is the act of translating an individual experience as it relates to a community. The act of commemorating can be through event or effort, where people act through a shared set of ideas about the past. Commemorating usually occurs due to a profound event like a war or heroic act, and links to a sense of pride or charity and commiseration. Monuments also are helpful to compare to memorials. We use these terms interchangeably. A memorial is something that doesn't have a particular shared collective dimension to it. So that is, to me, a little less helpful in terms of talking about the power of one of those two things. If we're talking about togetherness, the monument has more of that. So we will now look at what justice in civic art can look like. I return to the theme of empathetic human figures in architecture that I started with in those Gothic churches in Germany. There are notable examples where culture saw fit to place human beings as allegorical figures representing virtues such as justice, literally on or around our built environment as iconographic content, imploring everyone towards virtuous lives. And here just a sequence of examples of that, just literally on architecture. No mistaking what the theme is, and being presented in pretty provocative and direct ways. It's an example of the Supreme Court in Washington, D.C. Here is a mural in the city of Siena, Italy. It's not a monument, but it's interesting also to think about works of civic art that very directly represent the idea of what a good government is or what bad government is. So here it's said in very explicit terms within this capital for this particular city in Italy. And ultimately, the most prominent of our representations of liberty and justice in the nation, as seen here at the Statue of Liberty. So I think it's fair to say, while we have it somewhat in our country, we don't really do it anymore. And if we do, it's pretty exceptional. We don't really think about embedding virtue in our buildings and spaces in the same way anymore. And so I ask the question, why is that? Why don't we use civic art to confidently pronounce and promote the virtue of justice and the blessing of freedom in a beautiful and inspiring way? And I'll go ahead and give you my answer. It's threefold. One, because we have devalued the capacity of beauty and beautiful art as a human necessity to attract and then transcend mundanity, to inspire goodness through the senses. Today, the architectural profession in particular and academies resoundingly promote an aesthetic that has consciously dismissed beauty as a major driver in architecture. Second, because through the promotion of autonomy, we have lost or ignored the traditional notion of civic unity, in that we are part of a larger whole that can offer identity, memory, and virtue in our cities. Some symptomatic examples we can point to are the pairing of suburban sprawl and vacated city centers as commercial cores versus a vital and diverse mixed-use neighborhood, and the ever-popular and increasing reality of virtual isolationism. I might also add to this earbuds, and that's at the expense of me sounding like a Luddite, which I'm not. In this context, maturity is harder to come by with feelings of selfishness, separation, distance, indifference, entitlement, and offense, unabated offense. And lastly, because we have de-emphasized the practice of the virtue to attain true liberty and justice, in other words, adopting a distorted definition of liberty and freedom as doing what you want, whenever and whenever you want to, in appeasing your appetite, leading to material enslavement. The idea of governing yourself so that you are more free to choose right for yourself and others is becoming more and more alien as a concept of freedom. This then becomes less of a priority to show in the built environment. What adds to this in a particular way is also the abuses of civic art that we can point to with reasonable objection. We have been bitten by monumental failures in misrepresentation and imbalance, which makes us cautious, skeptical, and maybe even paralyzed by stigmatism to attempt populating our built environment with such figures. The ultimate result of these tendencies is the dissolution of the localized social civic realm and an increased atomized political and private realm where individuals go about leading private and separate lives. Within such a context of diminished social buy-in, it is difficult to see a meaningful investment in civic art And on the contrary, civic art, and more particularly monuments, would be increasingly unrecognizable, misunderstood, and met with suspicion. This may also help to explain our current climate of hostility towards monuments of all stripes. Civic iconoclasm seems to be a general trend beyond overt symbols of offense. Efforts to excise statues of historic, patriotic, and cultural heroes, religious figures, and churches suggest an insistence of purification. So, we are back to the question of what exactly is the value of these participants in our civic life. Should we have civic art at all? Or should we aim to avoid any potential offense whatsoever? At the end of the day, is there anyone or anything that is immaculate enough to withstand all scrutiny? If they all go away, is there substantial loss of something essential? I'm probably, as you can tell at this point, telegraphing my own thoughts on this question, but it's certainly worth everybody asking themselves. I believe there would be a loss of something essential ultimately. The case I would make for monuments is distilled down to three essential qualities: identity, beauty, and unity. Starting with identity, commemorating or remembering values or virtues with others in a united way provides touch points for our individual and collective narrative. Human beings need narrative, as we are all part of a story. Memory plays a critical role in this need, which allows us to see who we are in the context of the world and understand the world in general. Current research efforts are taking place in the field of neuroscience right now, where empirical studies about our brain reveal that our identities are directly tied to our brain's ability to find narratives. There are two primary conveyors of civic narrative: human beings through verbal, written, or physical communication, and our built environment, particularly those through the focused vessel of monuments as the next closest thing to human beings. Monuments and memorials want to speak to us and tell our story, good, bad, and ugly. Monuments and memorials, by their nature, add to our narrative. The second essential quality is beauty. Beauty is useless as are monuments. They don't really do anything, and we can't really use them for anything. Instead, their value rests in fulfilling another elevated need. It is helpful to think about the origin story of modern commemoration, going back to the ritual of venerating relics during the Middle Ages. The relics of saints were meant to be honored and adored, not worshipped as idols. Relics act as a conduit to the saint they came from and reveal or give a foretaste to a greater reality. We can think of monuments in the same way, as part of that lineage. What they stand for and the beauty they use to attract us together can lead us to higher transcendent ideas about what it means to be a good and civil person. Lastly, we are social creatures and rely on one another to realize our potential. Whether we like it or not, we are our brothers and sisters' keepers. More than any other facet of architecture and urbanism, commemorating through monuments provides a powerful opportunity to unite people in an exceptional way. Okay, is everybody sold? Monuments are good? But I'm not out of the woods just yet. There are those pesky friends that keep getting in trouble. So if we're sold on this idea of monuments, then there's the obvious issue of what happens when monuments exist that don't represent current values. I've relied on two primary ideas that would help reconcile this challenge. One, in order to reconcile this, it is helpful to realize that this will always be the issue, given that monuments are provided by flawed creators and therefore subject to being flawed themselves. For this reason, monuments, like human beings, should be both held accountable and be afforded the opportunity where necessary to mature within a society. They are also products of their own age and reflect a time and culture that is particular to them. So it's an interesting hypothetical to consider yourself within the time that that monument was made and honestly say whether you would have said or done something different. And then the second point would be that human societies are complex, especially free societies like the one we live in. where nuanced understanding of human needs should be considered in order to calibrate expectations. The second idea here, sorry, I'm off sequence here. The second idea here involves a conceptual framework to help navigate all the attendant complexities involved with monuments. For this, I've enlisted the thoughts of political philosopher and Holocaust survivor Hannah Arendt, who posited that it is necessary in a traditional democracy to have three separate and distinct but somewhat overlapping spheres that accommodate human affairs. Those spheres or realms are the political, the private, and in between the two, the civic or social. The essence of the political realm is equality under the law as the only distinction between people, without discriminating factors. We are all equal. The private realm is exclusively for individual expression. Finally, the civic and social realm in the middle is defined by distinctions or discriminating acts of persons or group interests such as associations, engagements, expression, and commemorating. We're all free to think and be different and associate with others on those grounds. The social realm is an ambiguous, paradoxical realm where all things are not just distinguished by literal equality outside of the law, yet there is implicit expectation of civility, commonness, and charity. In this realm, humanity is admitted with the attendant volatility and messiness, with all of its attendant volatility and messiness. I like to think of this as the high-risk, high-reward realm. This is basically the place where all the non-political and private stuff happens. The benefit of an appreciation of these distinctions would be rightly placed expectations. This is useful as we can literally locate monuments within any one of these realms to better consider their existence. In the following slides, I will show each of these conditions. Starting with the political realm, on the national level, our nation's Capitol building and its grounds is a place to expect clear representation of equality under law. The National Mall admittedly gets ambiguous rather quickly as a social public space, but ultimately it is a primary civic space located in our nation's political axis mundi, political center. The political realm on the local level would follow suit. It would have that same type of expectation of equality under law. The private realm has a spectrum of privacy ranging from family residences where engagement between individuals involves private acts, like friendship and love, for example, to private institutions such as religious grounds and buildings where an explicit understanding of group expression and belief is granted through expectation. Private institutions like schools and universities can be seen as a larger and different family, where beyond explicit group expression it is reasonable to expect some presence of internal civility. Public education is a different matter in that it resides in the social realm, which is beholden to both political and private claims, and remain in a checks and balances relationship. Within the civic social realm is where things get interesting. There resides an expectation of freedom to represent public group expression, and that those expressions should not be subject to the same expectations set in either the political or the private realm. The social realm is a place of tension and humanity where there is no explicit expectation of equality in all things at all times and in all places, but rather it is an arena of dialogue and discourse. Contemporary notions of the civic realm seem to be moving towards a blurring of the political and social realm, where the expectation of literal individual equality found in the political realm and distrust of the past replace discriminating acts, therefore compromising the healthy distinction between the essential realms. This manifestation of the social realm has a flattening effect and ironically creates resentment and intolerance and inhibits commemoration. It also leads to a slippery slope scenario with bad precedents. Reinvesting in the social realm to provide for necessary human activity would also, with properly placed expectations, provide a context that allows for civic art to flourish. When stepping out from the private to the social realm, the milieu of humanity is admitted with all its fallenness. This is important because it is precisely where, by free association, group diversity can happen. Further, it nurtures a habit of togetherness, past, present, and future. In this model, civic discourse is more easily achieved. Otherwise, an atmosphere of hostility might arise. This is not to suggest that things in the social realm should not be corrected, or that it can't be addressed. Given a mindset of understanding and calibrated expectations, we can more maturely handle disagreeable monuments. The primary medium for monuments is memory, identity, and aesthetics. Each has a key role to play. The memories that happen through commemoration help us to make sense of the world in developing a comprehensive and truthful narrative. In order for this to happen, those memories necessarily need to be curated for relevance. That is to say, sometimes forgetting, removing, or correcting a memory is necessary. Sometimes it is prudent, and sometimes it is an overreaction based on misplaced expectation. Whatever the case is, we can set a worthy goal of commemorating by using the tenets of our nation's founding documents. These principles would help monuments communicate the aspirational values of equality, freedom, liberty, and unity, or at least not contradict them. The cumulative effect ultimately helps to remember the right things in the right ways to acquire a better sense of our identity and to potentially atone for wrongs in moving forward. I offer as a general way forward the adoption of the civil rights model that is based on the appeal of empathy. The success of the movement was gained through the understanding that you cannot change somebody's mind through violence, coercion, or being divided. Instead, success was achieved by appealing to the humanity of others through exercising prudence, justice, fortitude, and temperance in peacefully, patiently, and resolutely bringing people closer to witness the vices of inhumane treatment directed at other human beings. This approach helped illuminate the human dignity of African Americans. Implicit in the civil rights movement was also a spirit of forgiveness and reconciliation, enabling both sides to come to terms with the past and present wrongs. This sentiment is poignantly captured by the Thurgood Marshall quote on the relatively recent civil rights monument here in Richmond on the Virginia State Capitol grounds. The legal system can force open doors and sometimes even knock down walls, but it cannot build bridges. That job belongs to you and me. Adopting this mentality, there are two particular ways monuments and civic art can help: by bridging the gap of disproportionate monuments or the lack of monuments for underrepresented groups in literally increasing those numbers to provide balance for a more monumental landscape, and two, by correcting the record with respect to past monuments that do not reflect the objective values of today by directly addressing them in some way, shape, or form. Both of these approaches would help to make visible an investment in monumental justice. And here I showed several examples of that very thing happening. Showing literal figures, in particular people that others can readily identify with and being relatable, is very impactful. But further, and more importantly, is the virtue that they represent that is the greater value. So here are just a few examples of that happening, and all known to be relatively recent monuments that have added to this narrative. One that I will add, one that is not shown, is the Maggie Walker Memorial that I saw today, that I was introduced to and very pleasantly surprised by. It's a really fine work that does a lot of good civic value in that particular space. I've also done my own adding to this landscape, as was mentioned in the introduction, in some of the projects I've worked on. I've had the great privilege of doing this in my own professional career and hope to do more of it. But the first one I would introduce you to is the National Liberty Memorial. This is one that's ongoing and has been for some time. It's intended to go on the National Mall, so it's a big deal, right? But because it's a big deal, it also means it's going to take a whole long time with a lot of effort to make it happen. So I've been working since 2004 to try to make this happen. And this particular memorial is to honor the enslaved and freed black persons who fought in the Revolutionary War. There are about 5,000 to 10,000 acknowledged enslaved Americans who did this, and so they have zero recognition. I like this quote right here that really kind of gets down to it. Monuments innumerable have been erected to white soldiers who fought in the Revolution. Only a few kind words have been said for the colored soldiers. So here we would have a great opportunity to show their presence directly on our National Mall. And here's some preliminary designs of that, the sculptural figure on the left, representative man, woman, and child being shown in this watercolor rendering on the right. The other project that I've been involved with, and this is the one that was mentioned earlier, is the Freedmen's and Contrabands Memorial Project. That was the competition that I had won in 2008. It is now built, and I'll show you some images of that. But it was basically, and earlier today I had a conversation with somebody that told me something exactly like this is happening in Richmond and happens in many places, unfortunately. But in just south of Old Town Alexandria is the highway that overpasses the south end of the town. And they were doing some improvements to that and discovered in doing some digging that there were some tombstones there. So it was, just said jackhammer hit a tombstone, and so what's going on here? So they did some research, had the archaeologists come out and discovered what it actually was in doing their research to reveal that this was an African-American community cemetery of people that fled from the north to come, fled from the south to come to the north where they would be free. So that became the impetus for this project, put out as a competition. I won the won the competition. And then through a series of community engagement, we're ultimately able to get something built. So here are just some images of that and some of the background there. This was the competition-winning board that was trying to be very deferential to Old Town's character. So it is modest to some extent, but it's meant to bring all of these people back in pretty present ways, including bringing the grave markers back to the surface. But also within the architecture, I was working after I won the competition to bring some more symbolism that would connect with that particular community and especially the African-American backgrounds. Bringing in, I won't get into it, but bringing in some of the African traditional architecture that's available. And here is what the final project looks like. So then I'm moving on to the next part of this, bridging the gap and then correcting the record. As I alluded to, also plays an important role in the monumental justice by allowing a society to help with maturation. Within any of these realms I previously mentioned, there exists the possibility of a monument that does not reflect our current values, and that becomes particularly problematic within the political and social context. I've laid out what I believe to be a comprehensive, though not exhaustive, list of how to address these circumstances. I have identified 3 fundamental categories for that discernment. The first being de facto state, then direct action, and nuanced action. The de facto state is what it sounds like. It's leaving things as they are. Essentially, it addresses it by not addressing it. Where the monument and its grounds remain as is, it presumes a level of agreement to the monument's presence, whether due to passage of time with subsiding injury, impending process of action, or lack of individuals who might be offended. Here we see something very familiar to you all in the Jefferson Davis Memorial Monument that existed there until recently, that was left as is in that de facto state. It now has a new de facto state. Direct action is this next category. On the other hand, whether through destruction or defacement, presumes a level of offense due to the monument's presence that rises to a level of feeling the need for immediate and destructive action. Here we see the toppling of Jefferson Davis's statue and the defacement of the Lee Monument here in Richmond. Direct action through removal or relocation, whether temporary or permanent, presumes a level of offense due to the monument's presence that rises to a level of feeling the need for decisive action in erasing critical evidence of the monument's presence. Here we see 4 prominent Confederate monuments, to step out of Richmond for a minute, in New Orleans in their previous state of pedestaled repose. The key figures and themes of these monuments were then removed in a clandestine late-night operation, leaving only empty pedestals behind. For direct actions such as these, it usually involves two parties, the offender and the offended. However, there are other parties involved, as I'm sure you all know. There are other viewpoints to consider, that of historic preservation and civic art as it relates to the presence or absence of. Historic preservation offers a third-party view that places value on the artifact itself, that goes beyond the subject matter in question, looks through a more neutral lens of historic significance as an artifact of quality and or cultural value. The posture of historic preservation begs the question perhaps not previously considered. Whose monuments are these? Ours, present, theirs, past, or future, or all of the above? When considering direct action or removal or destruction, the sub-option of relocation tends to be the most preferred. Relocation to museums or other locations can serve as an opportunity for housing the monuments to avoid cultural amnesia and to better preserve the work. Here we see examples of an interior museum context where interpretive information can accompany the work, and a newer option of planting the monuments in a memorial garden, as you see here in these picturesque ruins that are sitting in the landscape. Civic art has great value, particularly in the civic, social, public realm, and as such deserves worthy consideration when something is taken away and creates a vacuum of civic art. A loss of character and identity necessarily follows, whether the subject is agreeable or not. Conversely, the absence of a provocative and memorable figure in our public arena can also serve as a powerful statement. A question follows both of these as to whether the impact subsides and what, if anything, could replace it. When considering the more challenging civic social realm, one option seems to present itself as the most promising and allowing for humanity, providing for diversity, and maintaining civic art simultaneously. This is contextualization, which presumes a value in maintaining a monument that is relatively intact and in situ, but with additional context information that helps to add to the narrative in offering a more complete picture. Some types of contextualization are remain and explain information plaques on sort of the low end of interference, adding monuments adjacent to the original, juxtaposing engagement, and finally augmentation. Below you can see an example of the plaque that is placed near the monument in question to offer an objective truth of the situation. Adjacent in-kind contextualization can take a more involved and dynamic path that engages in frozen theater in the social arena. Juxtaposing monuments can make narratives more complete, rich, human, and ongoing. In this example, we see a recently added colored soldier in the same civic square as a pre-existing Confederate monument in Franklin, Tennessee. And the differences are very jarring, and maybe there's something to that. Returning to Richmond, we have the in-kind statue of Arthur Ashe that is now engaged in empty conversation. Similarly, there's the new statue by artist Kehinde Wiley, Rumors of War. I went to see both of those statues earlier today, that poses a direct juxtapositional reference by association to Jeb Stuart. Nuanced action to entirely replace a monument presumes a value of wanting a civic work of art in that location that does not have an association with the previous monument. We see here, while a pre-existing column still stands behind a temporary African diaspora monument in place of that removed Lee statue in New Orleans. Which brings us to a more nuanced action to augment, appropriate, or co-opt existing monuments. This presumes a value in maintaining an explicit, recognizable essence of the original monument while introducing new content and meaning. Here we see in Rome the co-opting of the Pantheon and Colosseum from pagan entertainment at the expense of Christians to Christian places of worship. A powerful statement. And another example in Rome of the Emperor Trajan being replaced by the figure of St. Peter atop the monumental column. So what do you do with all this information? These are the options. What can we do? And how do you decide what to do in any given circumstance? I've given some thought to this and would also like to offer this as a discernment of action. Having presented all these options, I would like to propose a means for how to assess which of these options is appropriate for any given circumstance. I suggest that the following 4 points be addressed. First, establish a criteria for assessment by defining what our current objective values are. Those aren't always clear. Second, determine what the primary essence of a monument is relative to that objective value. And third, acknowledge the subsidiary nuance that should be afforded any monument. Finally, assess that individual monument by answering key essential questions. I would like to then acknowledge directly one of the main reasons for why I'm here, that being to offer some thoughts on Monument Ave and what could possibly be done here in Richmond. So as I go through this discernment process, I'd like you to think about, answer the questions basically, and think about what you think might make the most sense. The first thing we'll look at is the objective values, and I've kind of touched on this earlier. Given the framework of the realms, the essential value that can be identified as a worthy and objective goal for any of the realms in any city could be said to consist of essential American values as seen in our country's foundational documents. Easier said than done. The Constitution, Declaration of Independence, and the Bill of Rights, as mentioned previously, can be a starting point for that. From that, you could use those documents and look at any monument and say, is it falling within whatever those words say in those documents? If it doesn't, then you've got to figure out, is there on a scale, how it does or does not meet that. So from that idea of objective values, you could start to formulate a statement. The objective goal and basis for assessment of any monument in any realm would be to offer a visual manifestation of particular content that either communicates the aspirational values of justice, liberty, unity, and equality for all human beings and citizens of the United States, or at least it does not substantively and disproportionately contradict them. So based on this objective value, here's the spectrum I was talking about. We would be able to assess any given monument given its physical evidence, basically, in essence, and located on this spectrum that I've laid out here that goes from overt anti-American monuments that reflect anti-American values such as fascism, communism, et cetera, that sort of ideology, to very, very patriotic monuments. So anywhere along here, and this is my own spectrum, so it could be adjusted, of course. But that would, again, it's like starting point attempts at how to assess. The second category here would be subsidiarity, and that, just to lay out a definition, is the principle of social organization that holds that social and political issues should be dealt with at the most immediate or local level that is consistent with their resolution. So decisions that are made locally tend to be more valuable in terms of avoiding draconian political flattening. Local decisions are also the most inclined towards the notion of community. Assessment would naturally include those parties, stakeholders, the culture of place, and the means by which a decision would be made. Finally, each monument deserves the due diligence of answering essential questions. And you can see I've just listed out here the who, what, where, why, when, how, and you can see what those questions in particular mean without going through each one, but that it would be a fairly exhaustive means of trying to vet the monument by knowing exactly what it is. Okay. Let us now address the monumental elephant in the room. Sorry for all that heavy, wordy stuff. So I would like to, and this is where the fun begins, I would like to offer my own thoughts and ideas on what could happen for Monument Ave, with a healthy caveat that these are my own outsider responses for the sake of generating other thought and action and are necessarily inadequate. Given that all Confederate associated monuments are removed, the de facto state is clearly not an option for treatment as a result of direct action. This leaves open the options of the current de facto state of non-treatment or void, and as I understand now, for Lee Circle, it would be plantings, some landscaping, bringing the monuments back as they were, or contextualizing, replacing, or augmenting them. First, I do think it is necessary to address each monument individually. The history of each of the Confederate monuments that were taken down do have a nuance to the arc of their narrative. Perhaps the Lee statue would not have been taken down if others did not follow in pronouncing a clear lost cause agenda. Perhaps the Maury Monument would not be taken down given its lack of implicit un-American content and deference to a wholly different subject of science, as opposed to the Civil War, as well as the intent and means by which it was raised. Rather, again, it is the broader context and association with others that seems to have been its downfall. In my assessment, the essence of these monuments are not at the most extreme ends of the spectrum. They may, to me, they may land in the middle ground of explicit or implicit un-American category, which perhaps explains why they've stood for as long as they have. This, in my mind, opens the door to perhaps bringing back some aspects of the monuments that are recognizable. The premise of subsidiary nuance is something of a nuisance. It refers primarily to the realms and who should be involved in the decision-making. Here's where things get tough. This is admittedly the most challenging aspect of assessing what should be done. The monuments, being in the social realm, would ideally be handled by the local stakeholders, as they are the most invested and represent the truth of the matter, whether that's agreed to or not. There is also the complexity of ownership of the land and the statues relative to the state, all stuff I don't really know too well. The breadth of Confederate monuments on the avenue may be seen as a de facto political, and for that reason would it compel agency outside of local community to be involved, at least in the removal, as an annulment of their social realm status. This is where the civil rights mentality kicks in, one of non-coercion and force, allowing for reconciliation. Not entirely knowing what decision-making bodies currently exist and what their capacities are, it seems to make sense that representative bodies be assembled with, a representative body be assembled with deference to the local community for decision-making. Acknowledging that contentiousness and lack of expeditious action most likely abounds, a consistent, committed, and steadfast engagement in public discourse is necessary for true reconciliation. Included in this consideration are the needs of the local community, from safety to civic art. The other option is all decision-making responsibilities can be handed to me. Thank you for laughing. Kidding aside, mediation works pretty well. Third parties can do a lot of good in terms of alleviating contentiousness and inaction. And at the expense of seeming lazy and knowing that it's later in the day, I will sidestep the complexity of responding to essential questions because I don't know what they are, and I certainly wouldn't know the answers to them. So instead, I will, based on a general cursory sense of what the answers could be, I will move forward with this proposal. I would propose for Monument Ave that the community double down on the benefits of monuments, not just as civic art, but as a catalyst of reconciliation and embrace a maturation process of achieving greater justice, liberty, and unity. As I understand it, there seems to currently be an understandable paralysis about what to do next, given the trauma and consternation revolving around recent events culminating in the destruction and removal of the Confederate monuments. In due time, letting the guard down and allowing for tensions to ease may allow for a vision of possibility to form, one that recognizes the ability and opportunity to create a new narrative. The short term could be taken advantage of by vetting ideas through temporary means that could act as a catalyst to more permanent ideas without being bound by anxiety. There is a compelling tradition of ephemeral civic art that could allow for uncommitted expression of ideas that are affordable and would allow multiple people or groups to propose multiple ideas. Some creative construction techniques that can be found today include sophisticated usage of cardboard to construct ephemeral models, Other ideas would include possible design charrettes from professionals, university students, and competitions. Attempting something like this would be a positive act that could lead to getting the ball rolling and maybe shake off some of the paralysis. The monuments that were removed took place at a time, albeit not too long ago, when a large segment of population were considered subhuman. I believe we can acknowledge we are past that and can recalibrate through consensus and acts of faith what commemorating can look like now and into the future. That idea, in my humble opinion, should also not entirely expel those past monuments from another era, but rather embrace the truth of their existence. Though the Confederate monuments on Monument Ave don't reflect our current values, they do lay claim to a truth of the past. They therefore can evolve over time to provide identity, memory, and education, encouraging community regularly to overcome flaws and to be better versions of ourselves for and with others, as opposed to being merely statements of power or vessels of strict historicism. Moving forward with a principled framework such as the one I've presented, but also with the reassurance through expectation that when something goes wrong, and it will go wrong, we are able to handle it with maturity and wisdom, just as we would any human being within society. Nuanced situations like this call for a nuanced response. The solution, as I see it, should make up for disparity and bridging the gap by providing more diverse but exceptional representation without adopting a policy of nullification. Portions of existing removed monuments could be brought back in some capacity with attendant contextualization and augmentation. By including additional works in close proximity with modifications to existing pieces, sites can offer a much more rich, complete, and sophisticated interpretation of the historical events of the Civil War, for example. To take one example, the most prominent in Lee Circle, the site would undergo a transformation from the veneration of Robert E. Lee, who by all accounts did not want to be commemorated for losing, to a populated space full of diversity of figures from the Civil War with the possible presence of Robert E. Lee. The space would be intent on providing a dynamic social space for civic engagement. Additional monuments of exceptional figures that represent national or civic virtue could include United States colored troops, African American women that supported them, and abolitionists, just to name a few. The heroic equestrian statue Traveler would be housed in a museum, or remain housed. I don't know where he is. While the existing pedestal would return and become a generator of the aesthetic theme for the entire circle. Ultimately, it is a very accomplished, beautiful work of art, well suited to the task of civic art. Adopting or co-opting the pre-existing classical language would be encouraged, given its exceptional qualifications, as commemoration is congruent with the idea of passing on from culture to culture through a shared timeless language. The aesthetics of classical and traditional monuments are based on principles that render humanistic, recognizable, ordered, beautiful, and meaningful works of civic art that bring delight to civic spaces. Further, traditional monuments avail themselves to universality in that these same principles can occur in completely different places and times, yielding a rich resultant of both commonness and variety. These things should be available for all people in all generations to benefit from and call their own. Finally, atop the pedestal would reside new allegorical figures of justice and peace, which were originally intended as figures on the pedestal bas relief. In the middle of the composition and at the top would fly the ultimate symbol of unity in the American flag. The proposed scene acts as a model of civic commemorative discourse in the civic realm. The primary monument in this scene of complexity could be seen as representing the political realm in which all are equal and in which no particular human figure presides. Rather, allegorical figures speak to shared common values and virtue. Meanwhile, at the periphery are human figures with inevitable flaws, but all with an intent to play nice and represent a multiplicity of commemorative acts of unity. I conclude with this final thought. America has complex and deep sins, but not insurmountable ones. We have in our founding a great capacity for self-correction and maturation through virtue. Virtues such as prudence, justice, fortitude, and temperance are written in our DNA, making it very possible to achieve peace with the past. Richmond, in its unique circumstances, has an incredible opportunity that does not exist to this degree for any other city in our nation. To take this lead in the mending of our nation as a model of how to use monuments to bring about welfare, justice, liberty, and unity. Thank you very much. Okay. Okay, so I've got a couple questions here. I'll try to answer as best as I can and as quickly as I can. As a society, what responsibility do we have to plan for the interpretations and critical evaluation of civic art by future generations? That's a great question. In other words, if we do build and design models and put them up today, how can we ensure that they won't offend somebody later down the line? I think I'm understanding that question correctly. I suppose my short answer to that would be we can't. We simply can't avoid that. Again, this is sort of my premise that this is a human endeavor and it will just inevitably be flawed. That doesn't mean we can't try to make it better, make it as agreeable as possible to everybody at every time, in any circumstance. And that to me is critical, because if we took the posture of feeling the need to do that's a burden on us, then frankly nothing would ever get done. So that would be my answer to that. I hope it's somewhat on point. For those who study other realms of justice, such as criminal justice, social justice, victims' rights justice, or how can this be interrelated, intersectional with these studies? So the idea of other disciplines, I'll take the example of criminal justice. How can the realms help with that thought process? And I would say, that it definitely would help, because it's a framework by this political philosopher that has much better thoughts about it than I do. That's why I have to rely on people, just an architect. But that those ideas are a great framework for working through really complex stuff. So when you're talking about criminal justice, I don't know what the realms necessarily do with respect to how that plays out, but I have to think that it's useful in trying to understand certain action of criminal justice. So I feel like it would be good to have an example from whoever had the question, but I would simply offer that as a very thoughtful way forward to think about, to better problem solve, is probably the best way to put it, problem solve with a really thoughtful framework. Okay, why should black people be the sole decision makers as to what will happen with Monument Ave? With whatever I said here, that shouldn't be a takeaway at all, and maybe that's not coming from me, but from the community of which I'm an outsider. And I think I get the tone of this question, that there's a lot of deference to those who are underrepresented right now. Like there's a lot of caring people that I've engaged with that are very sincerely interested in balancing things out, as I believe that is true, that should be. So I'll also say maybe that goes a step too far in ignoring other people in this whole process. That's been one of my key questions. Like if I were to just talk to you all without the cards, I'd want to know what your thoughts are. I don't know. But I know there are multiple opinions about this topic. There have to be. And I don't know, the substance of them or how many people per thought, But I would suggest that it isn't just black people, one, that are making decisions about this. You've got a room full of people that are not just black, that I'm pretty certain are interested in this subject and what would happen on Monument Ave. So, I would also acknowledge, though, that there needs to blindly be consideration of everybody's thoughts on the matter.
White people only made the decision because black people made the decision for the next
Oh, I see what you're saying. Sorry, thank you. I appreciate that.
It's framing it in justice and what belongs to people.
Yeah. I got you.
Monument Avenue should then belong to black people for the next 20 to 30 years. So why can't
Yeah. I get that. That's an easy one. It's not, and I'm not making light of it, but it's tough. That one is tough because I get the impulse of saying, now it's our turn. I get that, and this hitting back in a way. I've been trying to avoid that. I've been very intentionally trying to avoid that it's a grudge match, that it's about revenge. And maybe that's not what you're getting at, but I think, to my earlier point in my misinterpretation of your question, I could see people getting, it goes back to the civil rights comment that I'm talking about, in that that would be coercion to me, to just say, okay, we're going to take over now. So it doesn't reconcile anything to me. It maybe reconciles for one group of people, I think, I don't know. But to me, it's, maybe on some level it's justice, yeah. But it doesn't, it may be a just thing to do, but what's the bottom line? You know, what are we ultimately trying to do? Controlling the narrative. Yeah, control's a tough thing. And maybe that's what happens. All I'm here to say is that's not going to solve everything. Okay, then that's what would happen. Yeah, I mean that's what, as far as I interpret it, what happened on Monument Ave was just that. The ball's rolling. It's going there anyway, right? Things got taken down as a direct result of controlling action. Absolutely. Yeah, we can do a lot of things with controlling action, but we got to be careful. That's what I'm trying to say. Just be careful with that. That's powerful. Yeah, sorry. I mean, let's take a whole week to talk about this one. How do you reconcile the need for understanding tolerance in the face of inherently violent monuments? I'll stop there. There's more to this question. The spectrum that I showed of going from overtly un-American to really patriotic, and maybe those aren't the right terms, the American thing. I was just trying to tie that into the whole Constitution as a framework of objective values, because what else can we look to if we're talking about unifying? But that there would be monuments out there that I think, this is a faith thing on my part, I think most people today would see something that was overtly offensive and say, yeah, that needs to come down. I think we're there. That's, again, my opinion. But if there's an inherently violent monument, and maybe we don't agree on what that means, but if there's something out there that's really bad, in other words, I would suggest that the Lee equestrian statue, aside from association, and understand that, is a guy on a horse. It's not like, he's not like, holding a noose with somebody. That would, to me, is like, that's really, really bad on a really extreme level. So there are monuments out there that aren't the level I just described, but that I think are clearly not okay, and that there would be an understanding and an intolerance of that. Do you think vandalism is warranted? Good question. Given the antagonistic statement made by the monuments in the modern political climate. Yeah, I'm a little torn on this one. It kind of goes to the last question. I'm all over the place because I'm an architect, and as I said, I'm an apologist for these monuments, and it's just hard to see things defaced, especially if they're of great value. But what would trump that is the idea of that providing a release, a sort of an emotional release, and that's I think primarily the result of that is an emotional response to these monuments to vandalize, and so there's a certain value to that. It's like taking the pressure release off that can be pretty valuable, but it shouldn't be a driver for all things. And again, I'm working against the whole emotional and control aspect of it because at the end of the day, it's fighting fire with fire, I think. there's sort of a poetic justice to that I like the spray painting that's happened on the monuments that I get and can appreciate as like a short-term thing that happened that got a clear point across. So that I think is powerful. I've got is that your question? Well, I wasn't saying, this one said defacement or vandalism. You're saying the same thing. Yeah, I was seeing the images of the spray paint on the monument. Yeah, I guess it's in the same, well, it's not the same category because it's not as temporary, right? It's a stronger statement to just remove it altogether. And maybe the comment about fire is more of an overarching thing. Like at some point, the emotional response of revenge, something like that. You know, we all get revenge, we get anger, all of those things, but they can't be the sustaining thing to move forward in a bigger way. That's my opinion. Does that make sense?
It does, but vandalism is not equal to kind of statues that throughout the slave and others.
Oh, no, it isn't. I'm sorry, I can't.
Actions have consequences, so people putting statues of slavery leaders naturally graffiti.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting that they're equal. I'm definitely not. Are you saying with the question or with what my response? I wasn't saying that they're equal. I agree with you on that. The spray painting and the taking it down are different things. Well, sorry, spray painting and it coming up, being there in the first place, right? The fact that it's there, of course, spray painting on it is anywhere near that thing having been there for so long in such a prominent and provocative way. I agree with that part. For the
Thank you all for coming out this evening. This concludes our lecture. We do have a post-reception reception at the Raleigh building, which is located on Franklin Avenue at 1001 Franklin Avenue. If you need some help, there are people I know in the audience that know their way to the Raleigh building, but we certainly would enjoy your attendance at that event. Please welcome me. Please help me thank Professor Howard for his talk tonight.
I sincerely would love to just be here for a week and talk, and maybe I can make that happen. Sincerely, since I at least won't do that anytime soon, don't have a plan to do that. I wonder if there's a way in which people can reach out to me, because all the comments, that's what I want. I want to feed myself to understanding more in a more truthful way what people's sentiments are. So it just can't. In this venue, it's not going to be sufficient. So anyway, if there's a way for you to reach out to me, I'd love to hear from you. Okay. Thank you all. It was great.